I will build you a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true, with thanksgiving. Gonna be a living sanctuary for you. ועשו לי מקדש ושכנתי בתוכם ואנחנו נברך יה מעתה ועד עולם.
Welcome everyone. Cantor Fishman and I welcome you to this Seder. Seder is perhaps one of the oldest, longest living rituals of the Jewish people, observed by more people than any other ritual that we have. The Seder table is the place that we invite not only friends and family, but in a sense it becomes a mikdash ma'at, a small temple, a place that is a sanctuary, and a place that where we create holiness. Why is this night different from all other nights? That's what we ask every year. And every year, we may have another reason, but most Seders are pretty similar, except we're a year older and our kids are growing up. This night truly is different, though. Because of COVID-19, we're all separated from many of the people whom we love. Families are not together. Communities are not coming together. And so we use the technology which we have and for which we're really grateful. And Cantor Fishman and I are really very grateful that we can bring you a Seder. So welcome everyone, and welcome Cantor. It's nice to be with you. Seder means order. But before we speak about that, and this is a first for us, so as a result, there may be some little give and take between us. You're going to light the candles for Yantiv, yeah?
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו להדליק נר של יום טוב.
Amen. So Seder means order. There's a particular order that we do this service tonight. And the order helps us preserve the ritual and preserve its meaning. In our tradition, we have those things which are fixed, those things which we do regularly, those things that we feel and we understand that we're commanded to do, and then we bring feeling to what we do also. Before the Haggadah was a printed book as we have before us now, Haggadahs or the Seder was done by heart. And the people needed a mnemonic device to remember what came first and what came second and what came third and all the way through the evening. And so we begin with that mnemonic device as we hear the recitation of the Seder.
קדש וחץ, כרפס יחץ, מגיד רוחצה, מוציא מצה, מרוק עורך, שולחן עורך, צפון ברך, הלל נרצה, יין עין עיני, יין עין עיני, יין עין עיני, יין עין עיני, יין
And so as we heard and as we know, we begin the sacred moment with the recitation of Kiddush, Kadesh. Kiddush, is not a blessing over wine, but rather Kiddush uses wine to bless the moment, to bless time. It's a unique notion that we introduced into the world, and that has to do with the capacity to sanctify time, to make certain moments, certain days special. That's what we do with Kiddush, and it's also a reflection of our celebration of freedom. We celebrate creation in Kiddush, and we also celebrate the fact that we were slaves, and then we left Egypt. We'll continue with the Kiddush, and you'll note the Nusach, the special melody which is done for the holiday of Pesach.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא פרי הגפן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר בחר בנו מכל עם ורוממנו מכל... This is not good. Wait. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא פרי הגפן.
אמן.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא פרי הגפן.
אמן.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר בחר בנו מכל עם ורוממנו מכל לשון וקידשנו במצוותיו. ותיתן לנו אדוני אלוהינו באהבה מועדים לשמחה חגים וזמנים לששון את יום חג המצות הזה. זמן חירותנו מקרא קודש זכר ליציאת מצרים. כי בנו בחרת ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים ומועדי קודשך בשמחה ובששון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש ישראל והזמנים.
אמן.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהחיינו וקימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה.
Amen. L'chaim. The next section of the Seder is Urchatz. The Seder is unique in that this is one service and one meal where we don't only wash once, we wash twice. And that's for a couple reasons. The first is that the Seder table is like the shulchan on the Mizbeach. It's the table where the sacrifice took place. It's a holy place, and so we enter holiness with a sense of cleanliness also. But the second is the Seder presented a halachic challenge, because normally we wash and say Al Netilat Yadayim right before we have bread or matzah. This night we're going to be eating the matzah a lot later, but we're going to be touching other foods. These days are days where we are acutely aware of how important washing our hands are, and it's always been a part of what it is we do before we eat. So the first washing is done without a blessing at all, but then it allows us to start to touch some of the foods, including the parsley. Can you see? Yeah. Okay. And that leads right to the Karpas. Passover is a holiday of freedom. We celebrate our liberation. We remember the slavery. There is a dynamic, a polarity between the bitter and the sweet. Passover is also a celebration of spring. Like all of our festivals, they're rooted in agriculture, they're rooted in nature, and they're rooted in our historical experiences. As a nod to the fact that this is a time of new life, new growth in springtime, we take karpas, we take the parsley, we dip it into salt water and we say a bracha. So we have the newness, the excitement, and the optimism of spring. And then the salt water is our tears, symbolic of our tears and our sweat. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri ha'adama.
Amen.
And now we come to Yachatz. And Yachatz, we break the middle matzah. There's my matzah plate with a matzah cover that comes from my grandmother and comes from Germany. You know, we're sitting here kind of alone, but together in some virtual space. But all of us also sit here with people from our past. That's really very much a very important part of Passover, the stories we tell and what it is that we remember. So I take the middle matzah, I break it into two, and one piece will be hidden. It's recognition of the fact that we know so much, but so much is hidden from us. We reveal a lot, but so much is hidden. And then we also know that when we break this matzah, half of it's going to become the Affliction, and this is a way of attracting our children's attention, because there is a hide and seek that will take place after the meal. And we break it, and it just symbolizes, or it emphasizes just what a paltry piece of bread this is. So I'm not sure where my microphone is, but did you hear that?
Yeah, it was very loud and clear.
Okay, good. So now I wrap this up, and then I'm going to have to hide it, and then I'm going to have to look for it myself. One of the good things about getting older is you forget where you put things. So this year's Afikomen search will be one where I'll have to test my own memory as to where I hide it. Magid. Magid is the beginning of telling the story. Halachma anya, behold, this is the bread of affliction. This is poor bread. This is the bread our ancestors ate when they were slaves. It's also the bread we know that symbolizes the rush the people were in order to be able to leave that first Passover. It tells a story. The bread tells a story. This very simple bread, the bread of slaves, becomes the bread that symbolizes freedom. Now we are here next year. May we be in the land of Israel. And finally, there's one other thing I'll say about it, and that is we welcome everybody when we break the bread. And I think that it's interesting to note that our doors are more closed than open these days. But I also know that we're all looking forward to, even dreaming about a time when our doors will open and we'll embrace each other. The cantor will sing Halachma Anya.
Halachma, halachma anya, di achalu avatana, be'ara demitzayim, be'ara demitzayim, kol dichfin yetei ve'echol, כל דצריך יתן ויפסח, השטחה לשנה הבאה בערדי ישראל, השתעבדי לשנה הבאה בני חורין, הלחמה ידי אכלו אבטנה בהרה במצרים, בהרה במצרים.
This is the bread of affliction which our ancestors ate in the land of Mitzrayim. Let all who are hungry, let them enter and eat. Let all who are in need, let them come celebrate Pesach. Now we are here next year in the land of Israel. Now we are enslaved. Next year we will be free. This takes us to one of the centerpieces of the Haggadah, and that's the 4 questions. You know, one of the central aspects of living a Jewish life is a commitment to continuously learn. And the more we learn, the more we understand. Our tradition became a tradition of learning as opposed to a tradition of ritual after the destruction of the temple. And so questions were asked, and questions are the way we learn best. What we learn from the 4 questions is that they're not answered, so we have to find them ourselves. What we know is that our questions lead us to seeking and to searching, and that's part of it also. Traditionally, we've had the youngest child at the Seder ask the 4 questions. Again, it's a way to keep them engaged. We will continue now with the 4 questions, and the youngest of these 2 children will ask the question.
Can the younger one ask?
Sure, please bring them in, yeah. Oh, the youngest of these 3, okay.
Yeah, we can have a younger one.
Great, Yair.
Ready? Oh, I know, we have the... We'll do it together. מה נשתנה הלילה הזה מכל הלילות, מכל הלילות, שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים חמץ ומצה, חמץ ומצה. הלילה הזה כולו מסע, הלילה הזה כולו מסע, שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים שאר ירקות, שאר ירקות. הלילה הזה מרור, מרור. הלילה הזה מרור, מרור. שבכל הלילות אין אנו מקבילים אפילו פעם אחת, אפילו פעם אחת. הלילה הזה שתי פעמים, הלילה הזה שתי פעמים, שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים בין יושבים ובין מסובים, בין יושבים ובין מסובים. הלילה הזה כולנו מסובים, הלילה הזה כולנו מסובים.
One of the beautiful things about our learning and a beautiful thing about our texts is that they continue to grow and they continue to evolve. We actually see in the Haggadah that there's different languages used. There's Aramaic and Hebrew, and there's certainly, In our Haggadah, there's English, and we find Haggadot from other cultures where there are different languages. There are two stories that are told about our enslavement. The first one is our master's story. It's the story that we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and God brought us out with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Avadim Chayinu. Cantor.
עבדים היינו, אתה בני חורים, עבדים היינו, אתה בני חורים, עבדים היינו, אתה בני חורים, אתה בני חורים, עבדים היינו, אתה בני חורים, עבדים היינו, אתה בני חורים, עבדים היינו, אתה בני חורים,
We were slaves to Pharaoh in Mitzrayim, but Adonai our God brought us forth with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. And if the Holy One, praised be He, had not taken our ancestors out of Mitzrayim, then we and our children and our children's children would still be enslaved to Pharaoh in Mitzrayim. Now, even if all of us were scholars, even if all of us were sages, even if all of us were elders, even if all of us were learned in the Torah, it would still be our duty to tell the story of the Exodus from Mitzrayim. Moreover, whoever elaborates upon the story of the Exodus deserves praise. So we know it's a story that we repeat. We say it every day in our liturgy, and we repeat it certainly at this momentous moment like Pesach. And we also know that we can continue to learn from it and learn more and more. And that's what we see in the next section, where the great rabbis of their time continued to study all night long. A tale is told about Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Joshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Tarfon. They were gathered in Bnei Brak discussing the Exodus from Egypt all through the night until their students came to them and said, "Masters, the time has come to recite the morning Shema." Now, these were the greatest teachers and rabbis of their time, and they were studying all night long, the story all night long. But there's more to it than that, because they were also the rabbis who defied the Romans, who told them they couldn't study, who told them they could no longer teach, they could no longer ordain rabbis. And the Passover Seder for them was an act of defiance, like what the Hebrew slaves did that very first night when they put the blood on the door. It was an act of defiance. And sometimes, in order to move history forward, one has to be defiant. Then Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said, "Behold, I am as old as the years of man, yet I was not convinced that the Exodus should be referred to every night, until Ben Zoma explained it to me through this verse, in order that you remember the day of your departure from Mitzrayim, all the days of your life. The days of your life indicates only during the day. All the days of your life includes the night as well," the sages explain. The days of your life means in this world, all the days of your life includes the days of the Messiah. So we do say this story, all the days of our lives. Day and night, we repeat this story because it is our root story, and it roots us both in God, and it also roots us in the concept of human freedom. Baruch HaMakom Baruch Hu, Baruch Shenatan Torah, Li'amo Yisrael, Baruch Hu. The Haggadah talks about 4 different types of children, 4 different sons. It talks about a Chacham, a wise son, a Rasha, a wicked son, a Tam, a simple son, and a She'eno Yodea Lishol, one who doesn't even know how to ask. There's a beautiful reading from the Santa Clara Haggadah from years ago, and it went like this. Pharaoh tried to destroy the future by killing the bodies of the children. He failed. Others destroy the future by killing the souls of the children. Sometimes they succeed, sometimes they fail. We honor the children, all children, children who sit in front of us, the future, child parts that live inside of us. the past, 4 kinds of children, 4 sets of child parts, 4 different perspectives, seeing things, feeling things, hearing things, knowing things differently, each to be respected, each to be told the story in a way that allows it to be open to learn. I have discovered as I've gotten older that I've had great teachers in my life, but there have been no teachers that have been greater than my children. Through their questions and through their ideas and through their perceptions, I've learned so much about myself and I've learned so much about life. And I would imagine that's true with all of you who have had the joys of child rearing. I didn't want to say childbearing. That's not been one of my experiences. So the 4 children, Cantor, you want to read? What does each of the children ask? And wait, before you do, there's one other thing I want to say about it. And that is, as the cantor reads it, and if you follow along, I gotta know that each child asks a little bit of a different question, but each child is responded to in a way that's appropriate for that child. It's a message to teachers. It's a message to parents, to anyone who wants to teach. It's actually a message in the dynamic of every relationship that you have to respond to the person where they are at. So there's an empathy in learning. Okay.
They take the Hebrew and you'll take the English?
Okay.
Really great with Hebrew.
Let's go alternate. Let's alternate. So we'll do the first in Hebrew because that's the Chacham. The second one, the wicked, I'll do in English. The third you'll do in Hebrew, and the fourth in English. Okay.
Great.
Okay.
חכם, מה הוא אומר? מה העדות והחוקים והמשפטים אשר ציווה אדוני אלוהינו אתכם? ואף אתה אמור לו כהלכות הפסח, אין מפטירין אחר הפסח אפיקומן. What does the wise child ask? What are the statutes, the laws, and the ordinances, thank you, which Adonai our God has commanded us? You should inform this child of all the laws of Pesach, including the ruling that nothing should be eaten after the Afikoman.
What does the wicked child ask? What does this ritual mean to you and not to him? Since he removes himself from the community by denying God's role in the Exodus, shake him by replying, this is done because of what Adonai did for me when I went out of Mitzrayim. For me, not for him. Had he been there, he would not have been redeemed. It's a very harsh response to that child. I have learned the best possible answer to this, and that is the child does not see himself as being part of the people. It's like the rebellious kid who's part of the family as opposed to the rebellious child who no longer sees himself or herself as part of the family. And that's what defines wickedness in the Jewish tradition, when you no longer identify with your people. Next.
תם, מה הוא אומר? מה זאת? ואמרת אליו, בחוזק יד הוציאנו אדוני ממצרים מבית עבדים. What does the simple child ask? What is this all about? You should tell him, it was with a mighty hand that Adonai took us out of Mitzrayim, out of the house of bondage.
ושאינו יודע לשאול את פתח לו, שנאמר והגדת לבנך, ביום ההוא לאמור, בעבור זה עשה אדוני לי, בצאתי ממצרים. As for the child who doesn't know how to ask, you should open the discussion for him, as it is written, and you shall explain to your child on that day, it is because of what Adonai did for me when I went free out of Mitzrayim. Now we come to this next section, which is V'tchila Ovdei Avodah Zarah. And this is the other answer about our slavery. So there was physical slavery in Egypt, and this is the reference to where we came from. Abraham came from a place of idolaters, a place of paganism, a place where power ruled. And he found the one God of the universe, the one God that's inside and part of every human being alive. And so that's this section. And we will move on to the next section now, V'hi Sha'amda. So V'hi Sha'amda, which is the next section, references the fact that we believe that God will ultimately watch over our people. In the ancient content of the Seder into contemporary times, We connect the promise of the covenant with Jews in every generation. Just as everyone is to see himself or herself as having been liberated from Egypt, so too all Jews in every generation should remember that we're bound to God in a sacred covenant through which God promises to sustain us and to save us. V'hi she'amda.
Rabbi, I learned today the Yonatan Razel. Yonatan Razel is a contemporary Israeli singer, musician. He's more from the Orthodox world, but everyone is singing his song. So I would like to just introduce a little melody from him for Ve'isha Amda. It's beautiful. He's playing it all over the country with philharmonics, and then I'll go into the traditional one.
Great.
והיא שעמדה לאבותינו, והיא שעמדה לאבותינו ולנו, שלא אחד בלבד עמד עלינו לכלותנו, עמד עלינו לכלותנו. והקדוש ברוך הוא מצילנו, מצילנו מידם. והקדוש ברוך הוא מצילנו, מצילנו מידם. והיא שעמדה, והיא שעמדה לאבותינו ולנו, והיא שעמדה, והיא שעמדה לאבותינו ולנו, שלא אחד בלבד עמד עלינו לכלותנו, שלא אחד בלבד עמד עלינו לכלותנו, אלא שבכל דור ודור עומדים עלינו לכלותנו, אלא שבכל דור ודור עומדים עלינו לכלותנו, והקדוש ברוך הוא מצילנו מידם, והקדוש ברוך הוא מצילנו מידם.
It's reflective of a promise that always gave us hope, that somehow we knew that no matter what type of challenge we faced and no matter who the oppressor was, that if we retained our hope and our faith, that we would get through that. In some ways, I think that our history and our experience of that is very helpful to us these days. And though this is a plague that we're facing right now, this COVID-19, that the world is facing, we also know that we're going to get through this, that this is not going to be the end of our existence, not of us as a people and not of humanity either. I think that when we talk about what is who oppresses us and what are the dangers in life, we do understand that sometimes they're external and sometimes they're internal, and that we have to be careful both of those who threaten us from outside. We have to be careful from those who don't seem to be threatening us but are deceiving us. We have to be careful for the ways we deceive ourselves, and we have to take care that we ourselves don't become oppressors. The next section of the Haggadah is a section of learning. It's where the essential text of the Haggadah is given, and then the rabbinic interpretation of each of them. So we can move ahead to, my father was a wandering Aramean, and he went down to Mitzrayim. He was impelled by force of the divine word, as it is written, know for a certainty that your offspring shall be strangers in a strange land, and they shall be enslaved and afflicted for 400 years. From the very beginning, in Abraham's desire to separate from that place where he was rooted, to find a new way of living a life with a new type of commitment, being part of a a God of a people, but a universal God of all people. He knew what was coming ultimately, and it would be part of the trials and the tests and the trials that we would face as a Jewish people. And we're going to move forward. We're going to go to a contemporary African-American spiritual that's in many, many Haggadot. I think that, Cantor, you have a couple things you could sing here, and I'd really appreciate it. I know everyone would love to hear from you. And everyone, again, you can just join in and sing as loud as you want with the Cantor. This desire for freedom is a desire that all human beings have, and it's a right for every single human being. So one thing, before you get on, we're going to describe the elements on the Seder plate, but I'll show you that one of the elements that we put on our Seder plate is an orange. So you might ask, why do we have an orange on a Seder plate? There are a couple stories that are told as to why it exists, but one is a story told by Susanna Heschel, who was the daughter of the great late Jewish thinker Abraham Joshua Heschel. And there apparently was a conversation she overheard with her father and other great scholars. And it was a conversation about what women's roles in Judaism and whether or not women would become a rabbi. And one of the great scholars said, women will be rabbis, and we could read and cantors when there's an orange on the Seder plate. So there's an orange on the Seder plate. And women's rights, women's liberation, women's equality, women's freedom is as important to us as the rights, the liberation, and the freedom of all people. So let's sing some of these freedom songs.
Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. When Israel was in Egypt land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand, let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free.
The recitation of the 10 plagues is an expression of not only memory, corporate memory, but it's also an expression of communal sensitivity and empathy. Because as we recite each of the plagues, what we do is we take a drop of wine from our cup. We're saying that we can't be fully joyful. We can't drink all of our wine. Because in order for the Hebrew people to be redeemed, to be liberated, other people had to suffer. And their suffering is something that we feel. So I'm going to recite each of the 10 plagues, and I guess after each of the plagues, you'll repeat it together with Cantor. Dam, Tzvardeya, Kinin, Arov, Dever, Chin, Barad, Arbe, Choshech, Makat Bechorot. Now we come to Dayenu, certainly a section that we all love. And Dayenu has a lot of different levels to understand. And certainly one is that we understand how we've been blessed in the past. And we also always look for more. It's human nature to always want more, to desire more, to have more, to aspire for more. But I think at times it's important to be able to sit down and say, Dayenu, I have enough. The question is, during a time such as this, for all of us, can we say Dayenu? And I think the answer is yes, because I think during a time such as this, we do reflect on what it is that we do have. We reflect on those things that are most essential and most important, those things which bless us. And as we certainly know that there are so many who are suffering now, and so many who have died, and so many who are sick, and so many who are just struggling so terribly to fight the disease, we are sitting here in our space of holiness saying, Dayenu, we're thankful for where God has brought us. Cantor Fishman will do the first stanza, the second stanza, and then the last two stanzas, okay?
הילו הוציאנו ממצרים ולא עשה בהם שבטים דיינו דיינו אילו עשה בהם שבטים ולא עשה באלוהים ולא עשה באלוהים דיינו דיינו אילו נתן לנו את התורה ולא הכניסנו לארץ ישראל דיינו אילו הכניסנו לארץ ישראל ולא בנה לנו את בית הבחירה ולא בנה לנו את בית הבחירה דיינו
על אחת כמה וכמה טובה כפולה מכופלת למקום עלינו. How manifold and miraculous are the great deeds that our God has performed for us, from taking us out of Mitzrayim to building the temple. The rabbis considered the next section to be really important because it pointed out the three most important symbols of the Seder. But what is also important for us to realize as moderns who look back at Jewish history is that these three symbols were part of the temple rite, the ritual that had to do with the sacrificial offering. That was what was the observance of Pesach, and it's not anymore, obviously, and hasn't been for thousands of years. One of the beauties of Judaism has been in its ability to reshape itself when times change, when history imposes upon us dramatic shifts. 2,000 years ago, we had a temple, and then it was destroyed, and we were sent into exile, and we took all the essential meanings of the biblical period and the temple, and we gave it new meaning and thus gave it new life. Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. Those are the three things that were part of the temple ritual, and now we give it another meaning. Rabban Gamliel haya omer kol shelo amar shlosha dvarim elu b'Pesach lo yatsa yedei chovoto ve'elu hein. Rabban Gamliel said these are the three things you have to explain in order to be able to fulfill your duty at the Seder table. So we're going to read each of the three sections. Why don't we'll read Hebrew, the first section just in Hebrew, the second section just in English, and the third section just in Hebrew. So I'll do the Hebrew, you'll do the English. Okay.
No. Should I start in Hebrew?
בבקשה.
תודה. פסח, שהיו אבותינו אוכלים בזמן שבית המקדש היה קיים, על שום מה? על שום שפסח הקדוש ברוך הוא על בתי אבותינו במצרים, שנאמר, ואמרתם, זבח פסח הוא לאדוני, אשר פסח על בני ישראל במצרים, ונפו את מצרים ואת בתינו הציל, ויקוד העם וישתחוו.
Matzah zo shano achlim. Matzah, why do we eat it? To remind ourselves that even before the dough of our ancestors had time to rise, the Supreme King of Kings, the Holy One, praised be He, revealed Himself and redeemed them. As it is written, and they baked the dough which they had brought from Mitzrayim into unleavened cakes. It did not rise since they were hurried out of Mitzrayim, and they could not delay, nor had they prepared other provisions for themselves.
מרור, why do we eat it? מרור זה שאנו אוכלים על שום מה? על שום שמררו המצרים את חיי אבותינו במצרים, שנאמר, והם מררו את חייהם בעבודה קשה, בחומר ובלבנים, ובכל עבודה בשדה, את כל עבודתם אשר עבדו בהם בפרך.
The next section has what I consider to be the most important line of the Seder in terms of what connects us to the past. The line is B'chol dor vador chayav adam lirot et atzmo ke'ilu hu yatsa mimitzrayim. And although I will say it's the most important line, I do think it's understood in different ways. The translation is that in every generation, every person is required to see themselves as if they personally went out from Egypt. And let me tell you the two ways that it can be read. One way of reading this line is that it creates an identity with the people and its history. We should understand that we were there when our people experienced the wonders of God. We should understand that we were there when we experienced the liberation and the redemption from Egypt, and that we've been part of that people for millennium. And so it creates an identity of belonging to a particular people. It creates an identification with our tribe, as it were. But the other idea here is that if we remember that we were slaves, then we remember also what it feels like to be enslaved. And it is meant to create within us a sense of empathy for those who are enslaved. And we know that that enslavement could be hunger, it could be poverty, it could be because one is of a different gender identity, it could be because one is of a different nationality, one lives on the other side of the border. And we know what it's like to be there. And because we experience it, we know what it's like, then it compels us to be empathetic and sensitive to the plight of those who are in need. And so there are two different readings of this. And frankly, I think our job is to balance both. By virtue of keeping alive our identity, we know who we are and where we come from. But by virtue of keeping alive our identity also, we know what our responsibilities are to the world. We were slaves. Today we are free. And for that we're grateful. We'll lift the cup of wine and say, Lefichach anachnu chayavim. Lehodot, lehalel, leshabech, lefa'er, leromim, lehader, levarech, le'alei, ukales. Lemisha asa lavotenu velanu, et kol hanisim ha'elu. Hotzianu me'avdut lecherut, me'agun lesimcha, me'avel yom tov, me'afela le'or gadol. Mishibud legula, v'nomar lefanav, shira chadasha. Hallelujah. And therefore, we must revere, exalt, extol, acclaim, adore, and glorify God, who performed miracles for our ancestors and for us. He took us from slavery to freedom, from despair to joy, from mourning to celebration, from darkness to light, from enslavement to redemption, and therefore we sing before him a new song. This is known as the short Hallel. There's a bigger one after the meal, and we'll continue with B'tzeit Yisrael. If you're in the same Haggadah we are, it's found on page 23, B'tzeit Yisrael.
בצאת ישראל ממצרים, בית יעקב מעם לועס. בצאת ישראל ממצרים, בית יעקב מעם לועס. הייתה יהודה לקודשו ישראל, ממשלותיו הים רעה. וינוס הירדן, יסוב לאחור, ההרים רקדו חיילים, גבעות כבני צאן, מלך הים. כי תנוס הירדן, תיסוב לאחור, ההרים תרקדו חיילים, גבעות כבני צאן, מלפני אדון חולי הארץ, מלפני אלוה יעקב, ההופכי הצור, אגמיים, חלמיש, למיינו מים.
I will continue with the second cup of wine in the bracha.
ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא פרי הגפן.
Amen. Fine. Now comes the second washing, and this one is done with the proper bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al netilat yadayim. Now the motzi matzah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilat matzah. Excuse me. I'll dip some charoset, some maror into the charoset, or you could just eat the maror plain. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilat maror.
Amen.
And now, if you wish, you can take the sandwich, make the sandwich as Hillel did. It's a reminder of the temple and a reminder of the practice of Hillel. While the temple was in existence, Hillel would make a sandwich of the Pesach offering with matzah and maror, and eat it all three together in fulfillment of the verse. With matzot and maror, they shall eat it. So each of you at your own Seder, please take some matzah and maror and charoset and enjoy. We come to the end of this part of our Seder. You'll see us at the end of the big table that we shared the meal at. After, you can enjoy your meal and then pick it up as you wish and as you see fit. Thanks for bringing us into your home. Cantor, thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Happy Pesach.
Happy Pesach, Zis and Pesach, as we say, and Chag Sameach to everybody.